Geoff's Wonderland.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wonderland, the only place in the world of podcasting where the sun never sets on alternative thinking, incisive observation, and pointless conjecture. Well, actually, the sun I'm referring to sets about 20 minutes from now, but, you know, by that time you'll probably all be bored out of your minds. So, yeah, all good. Anyway, I'm your host. My name is Geoff Healy, and I'm an Australian singer-songwriter, piano entertainer, comedian and podcaster, currently living in Germany and playing shows mostly in Switzerland and Norway. And if that's not too much information, I'd like to know what is. But, you know, information is what we're all about here on the Wonderland, so I want to start today's show with some information, dressed up as useful advice. And here it is. If you are in polite company and you need to fart, and you just happen to have a cat lying on the sofa next to you, I'm guessing that you might be able to get away with it very nicely indeed if the cat happens to be purring loudly at the same time. Meaning you can always blame the cat, or the dog, or, you know, any other animal that happens to be sitting nearby that could conceivably be guilty of such an offence. Okay? You're welcome. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Okay, right. Now, just like that successfully silent and odourless fart, much of our lives is kind of subliminal. In other words, you know, it's stuff that we do regularly that we don't think too much about. One example of this is small talk, which probably started with the very first caveman to caveman grunt and probably meant something along the lines of, "Nice rock, looks like it might rain later, and are there any defenceless animals to eat around here?" So it might surprise you or not to hear that I have a theory about this very phenomenon. And I'm now going to stick that theory in one of the two places that it fits, namely, theory time.
Yo, you can't know what you can't know. I'm gonna tell you what I think I know. And I know what I know. This is what I know. Theory time.
And welcome to the informational safe house that is theory time. Most of us engage in small talk just about every day, sometimes quasi-reluctantly and often without really being aware that we're actually doing it. I reckon for many years people didn't really worry too much about it either. Maybe it didn't even have a name, it was just, you know, something that we did. But I think it's safe to say that nowadays, with time being such a valuable commodity, small talk has come to be thought of as undesirable, unnecessary, and maybe even kind of unfashionable. And I think it's definitely true that the older one gets, the less time one apparently has for it. So anyway, that begs the following questions. What defines small talk? Would we be better off without it? Would that make us happier? And would we get more stuff done? And then there's the larger question, could we actually cut it out of our lives completely? Well, no, I don't think we could, because I reckon it's so ingrained after more than 200,000 years of doing it that we wouldn't be able to stop doing it even if we wanted to. Also, it's far more important to us, I think, than any of us realises or wants to admit. Now, I know it's always a bit depressing when we feel there are things about our lives that are less than satisfactory and we come to realise that we're stuck with them. But it's my opinion that small talk would have come about for all sorts of practical reasons, such as giving us little bits of information which might ultimately turn out to be important or useful, even though we weren't actually aware of that at the time. And on top of that, it might also be the only means of verbal communication available to people who need to know stuff but have absolutely no desire to talk to another person with whom they have probably nothing in common other than 2 arms, 2 legs, and a pulse. And in another situation, it might be kind of like a necessary prelude to that big conversation you're eventually going to need to have with whoever you're making the small talk with. Finally, folks, I think if you've lost all your money, your family, your friends, your job, maybe even your health, as long as you're left with a voice and one functioning ear, at least you'd still have the possibility of small talk, wouldn't you? And you might suddenly think about it in a very different light indeed, because those are the times that we appreciate the otherwise unappreciated. Simple time spent without being wasted. Gifts which seem like curses, or pains in the arse which may eventually feel more like cushions. So enjoy that small talk, people. It might turn out to be a lot bigger than it sounds.
This is what I know. Theory time.
And that's it for a relatively sensible edition of Theory Time. And relative to that, of course, is the sensibleness, or maybe that's not even a word, sensibility. Does that sound better? Anyway, you know what I mean. Of our next segment, which is, of course, Song of the Day. Now, why sensible, I hear you ask? Well, I don't think we've played anything stupid so far, have we? Although... No, I have to admit, there is one song of mine that I think is kind of stupid, but I'll never mention its name. No, I'm not going to tell you which one it is, because maybe nobody else thinks it's stupid apart from one person I'm thinking of, and I'm not going to mention their name either. So let's just forget about that. No, I didn't say anything just then. That was nothing. Anyway, today we're going to listen to part of a rather sensible piano instrumental I wrote and recorded in 2021 for an album by the name of Mixed Bag. And this one's called Vigilantis. Yes, that's vigilantis, which, if you're wondering, is Latin for waking. And if you'd like to hear the song again, or any of my other musical creations, you can do that on any of the music streaming services or on my website, which is www.geoffhealy.com. And remember, that's Geoff with a G. Now, believe it or not, there's also music videos for that song and a bunch of my other songs there as well, along with most of the stuff I've released to date. Gig dates, news, every episode of The Wonderland, as well as other, fascinating stuff. So check that out when you get a spare 5 minutes. Anyway, that was a sensible song, wasn't it? Whereas our next segment may or may not quite fall under the same category heading. But without any further ado, let's get right into it. Let's get right into some
Good Times with Big Geoff
and Little Kev. 2, 1, 2,
3.
No, 2.
2.
Why do we have to start on 3?
We have to do this together. Can we start from 5?
We could.
Why don't we do like
on.
Dancers?
No, we've done that.
5, 6,
we talked about
7,
dances.
8.
People are going to think it's that dancers episode. Yeah, because I said they were really smart and intelligent.
Okay, so let's go backwards. Okay, let's
ready?
do it together.
Right.
Okay, here we go. Here we go,
Two,
Geoff. 3, 2,
1.
3, 2,
Go.
1. Now we're starting.
We're on. Okay. And that's the end of the program.
So
Thanks very much,
0.
folks. You've been lovely. But there you go. See, that's the thing.
I was just interjecting a little bit.
I was going to say, Kev, you could be Kev the Interjector. Kevin the Interjector.
Oh, well, that sounds...
No, it's not. It's not. It's good.
Is that like...
It's like the Terminator.
Is it good?
Yeah.
It sounds like a king's title.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
Kevin the Interjector.
Well, you could have been Kevin the Interjector. I mean... if you
Interjector.
Yeah, well, back in medieval times, they had interjectors, Kevin. They had them, and they were highly valued members of the medieval community in the castles.
Even
the
worse.
Kings thought they were the bee's
Even
knees.
worse.
Kevin the Interjector. That's it. Now, Kev, let's say, for argument's sake, right, that you get into a discussion with somebody and you start talking about, or even interjecting, it wouldn't matter,
yes.
about the environment, okay? You know, global warming, ecosystem, deforestation, carbon footprint or toe print.
Oh, it's getting so negative
environmental
now,
protection, etc. Now, let's say for argument's sake, Kevin, although I'm very sure this isn't true,
Yes.
that you are not, let's say, let's say that you're not very good at putting plastic bottles in one bin, glass bottles in another bin, paper in another, cardboard in another.
I'm really
deceased
good at that,
household
Geoff. I'm
pets
telling
in
you right
another
now.
one. Unwanted electrical goods in another, used prophylactics in another one, batteries in another, and small pieces of lilac-coloured cotton polyethylene in another one, etc., 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 okay? Are you with me, Kev? Are you with me? It's important that you're with me.
Oh, my God. What is
Well,
wrong
I'm
with
just
you?
saying that you're a pretty active...
I'm with you.
Let's say you're just not good with that stuff, but you're a pretty active guy, right? That is true, is it not, Kev? You're pretty active. Yeah. Right. You're
I'm
active. You're an active sort of person. You know, you're always jumping around and walking and running and, you know, just generally jumping around. Right.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. So now let's imagine that you've just purchased a brand new racing bike, which you habitually use twice a day, every day. Okay. So my question to you,
Yes.
Kevin, is, does that activity let you off the hook environmentally? Does it? Okay, does it?
What do you mean? It's adding to the betterment of Earth itself. I'm not using a car.
But okay, let me just close the circle for you. Here's the thing, Kev. This is what you have to remember if this ever happens to you. Because if you go out for a spin on your new bike in the morning and then later in the day you take the bike out for another run, you can honestly say that you are recycling.
Oh, for God's sakes. Oh, man.
Am I right or am I right? Am I right?
I think so. I think this is a keeper.
Yeah. See, folks, we aim to help here on the Wonderland.
My
Even in
brain
the
is
good
going to
times,
explode right now.
Hopefully,
It's going to
in a
get really
way
ugly.
that will give Kevin a migraine for the rest of the day. And I think it's job well done, folks. I do. So, Kev, what do you have to say about that? What do you have to say?
Oh, my God. I think my head is going to explode.
Okay, but it's good, isn't it? You got to admit, it is good. It's.
Well, it's a good explosion.
Yeah.
It's a small one, but a good one.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really... Man, how did you come up with that, Geoff?
I don't know, Kev. It just occurred to me because, I think of you and I think of things that need to be done or said, and I think Kevin needs to be the person in this scenario for some reason. And, and you are. It was
so
you.
Then
it
you
is you,
cycle,
and it will be you. So,
and then you recycle.
Yeah, you cycle again.
Yeah, you cycle again.
That's it.
So it's recycling.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it, right?
How about that?
Is that all we have to add right now?
That's all we've got to add.
That's it.
Right now. That's it.
Yeah. You know what?
Yep.
I can add nothing to this conversation.
No, fair enough. But could I borrow your bike later on?
Good times with Big Geoff
and Little Kev. And there you have it, the least sensible segment on the show, without a question. And of course, Little Kev and myself will be back again with more good times in just 2 short weeks. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing because I have another thought which I really, really do need to share with you. So without any further ado, let's grab the bolt cutters and break open the locks on
Geoff's Thought of the Day.
I was thinking about something, I think it was the thought of the day. I think it was the thought of the day.
And welcome to Thought of the Day. Okay, so here's my thought, and it's a biggie, so buckle up. Now, I'm trying to come up with a new concept for another podcast, but I really want it to be completely original, I don't want to do anything that's going to be like something else that's already out there. In fact, I want to take a completely opposite approach to the established views on what podcasting should be. Yeah, that's right. I want something fresh, something new, edgy, innovative, and not just a concept for a show, but an entirely new genre. One which will take the podcasting world by storm, grab it by the throat and give it one that'll really make people actively sit up and listen, or at least make them actively stand down and ignore. So basically, given the current global top 4 most popular podcast genres, that is true crime, comedy, news and sports, we here at the Wonderland Studios have come up with some truly, and I mean amazingly, groundbreaking ideas. And I'd like to share a couple of those with you right now. Now, I know that I can absolutely trust each and every one of you not to say anything about any of these to anybody because, it's a competitive, cutthroat world out there in podcasting land, and we don't want anyone else beating us to the punch, do we? So mum's the word, okay? Okay. Here we go. Concept number 1. Instead of true crime, fake crime, which is the same as true crime, except there's absolutely nothing factual or true about it at all, to the point where everything that happens is completely implausible and the victim ends up being alive at the end of the episode. Okay. Concept number 2. Instead of comedy, tragedy, where I construct scenarios which are sad, horrifying, depressing, and based on absolutely nothing in the human experience that anyone can actually relate to in any way, shape, or form. Concept number 3. Instead of news, olds. Okay, that isn't even a word, I know, but it does describe the genre in so much as, it's the diametric opposite to news. So it's all stuff that you've already heard, which isn't current anymore or relevant to anything, and all of it is completely devoid of the sort of stuff that might make it remotely interesting or relevant to anybody's life or situation in any way. And finally, concept number 4. Instead of sport, inactivity. A podcast relating to being in a state of non-movement and atrophy with laziness and lack of competitiveness and motivation as its central theme. And that's not all, folks. No, look, in the true spirit of innovation, the programs would be multifaceted, involving additional features that you won't find on any existing podcast. Guaranteed. For example, instead of having regular giveaways on the show, we will have regular takeaways. in which I, or employees of the Wonderland Studios, would come around to listeners' houses and, take certain items of our choosing as part of the fun. Instead of having regular guests, also, I will be regularly voice bombing other people's podcasts. Thanks to newly developed nanotechnology, recently smuggled out of NSA headquarters, I'll be spontaneously dropping into other podcasts in the middle of their conversations to, liven things up and then, of course, play those moments back on the Wonderland. So there you have it. Whichever way we decide to go, it will be the brave new wave of podcasting. And the only other thing we're going to need is a big enough surfboard.
I think it was the thought of the day.
That's it for Thought of the Day, and luckily for all of you, today's show. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and don't forget you can catch up with all of the Wonderland episodes to date on the podcasting platforms or on www.geoffhealy.com. Thanks again to Little Kev for his invaluable contribution to our Good Times segment. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So keep yourselves nice, think special, and stay on target until we meet again for episode 74 of The Wonderland.
Gotta get back to Geoff's Wonderland.